Hi, I'm John Waterhouse, and this is Weekday Wisdom. My question for you today is, do you believe in prayer? Obviously, being a spiritual center, we use what we call spiritual mind treatment, an affirmative prayer, as our basic tool. But what I find interesting is that if you can have something outside of our philosophy, outside of our culture, that demonstrates the power of something we do, it has some added validity. So I want to give you an example of something completely outside of who we are and what we do. And you tell me what you think. This is an article by a man named Bob Poole. He's a staff writer with the Los Angeles Times. And his article is entitled Responding to Prayer. A teenager who barely survived an accident returns from Britain to thank the police officer who started a prayer circle for her. And this is how the article goes. It seems at first that Alice Moat didn't have a prayer of a chance of surviving after being struck by a car on a busy Hollywood street. Authorities listed her as a probable fatality when the teenage British tourist was rushed into the hospital with severe head injuries. But an hour later, there was one prayer, and soon after, there were thousands. As doctors struggled to save Moat, the Los Angeles police sergeant assigned to investigate the crash was so moved that he stepped out of the emergency room and launched an international prayer circle on her behalf. One nurse flat out told me she'd never seen anyone come back from an injury like that, said Sergeant Dan Horan. But another nurse said she'd seen miracles happen there, so we could pray. So I did. No police training manual ever has prayer listed as a tool, but Horan, 47, did something he had never done before during his 20 years on the police force. He stood outside Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and dialed up friends on his cell phone to ask them to say a prayer for this one in the traffic accident he was investigating. His first call was to the deputy district attorney. I said, here's what's going on. The girl's name is Alice, and she's 19, and she's really badly hurt and needs some prayers. He asked his friend to ask their friends to help. Soon hundreds from all walks of life were praying for someone they'd never even heard of before, a chain reaction that would continue for weeks and bring her piles of get well cards and letters. I was standing at the nurse's station when Dr. Wilson, the trauma specialist on duty that night, made the call to Alice's parents, Horan said. He told them that she was in grave condition and that they should get there as soon as they could. I just thought about her poor parents getting that phone call, getting up, jumping on a plane, and taking that long ride all the way from London to Los Angeles, not knowing if their daughter would be alive when they got there. Alice Moat almost wasn't. She was barely clinging to life. Her badly swollen brain cut off its own oxygen supply. Doctors induced a coma as they fought to reduce intracranial pressure. At one point, last rites were administered, and there was talk of possibly harvesting her organs. Several times there were discussions about taking her off life support. By the time parents Anne and Rigel Moat and sister Lucy, 22, reached Los Angeles, Horan had telephoned or emailed nearly everyone he knew. He asked each to pray for the injured young woman and that they ask others to do the same. The Moats spent their days at Alice's bedside for a time. They didn't know of Horan's prayers or that he was returning nightly during his police shift to look on her. One day, one of the nurses said, "Did you know that the policeman's been coming in here to see Alice every day? He came in to see her every day for 10 weeks. It's just amazing," and Moat said. At the beginning, we didn't realize he had asked people to pray for her. But after a while, we knew. In England, all we'd seen of the LAPD was these cop shows. To see such a gentle person with the LAPD was amazing to us. The cranial swelling began to recede 2 weeks after the accident. Haran remembered his delight when he spoke with Alice Moat, and she was able to respond to him at first. By then, the police sergeant knew details of the girl's life and of the accident that nearly ended it. Moat had been hit by a BMW Sport utility vehicle in a Cahuenga Boulevard crosswalk near the Hollywood Bowl at 7:45 p.m. on September 23rd. She had been heading toward a young hostel after sightseeing along Hollywood's Walk of Fame. The 35-year-old West Los Angeles man driving the SUV was not cited. Moat had spent part of the summer working in a North Carolina store before ending her visit with a tour of the United States. She had been scheduled to return to Britain the day after the accident. I said, Alice, if you want to stay in America longer, you should have done it without going through all this, Haran said. She couldn't talk with all the tubes in her throat, but she could scribble a note, and she wrote, I love USA. 2 months later, Moat was strong enough to return by air ambulance to London for further hospital treatment and rehabilitation. That's when she and her family found out how far Haran's prayer chain had stretched. Hundreds of cards and emails began pouring into the family's home in the tiny village of West Nutfield outside of London. We learned the extent of what had happened when Alice started getting cards from people all over America. And Moat said, they'd say, I'm a friend of Dan's. We're all praying for Alice. We've saved them at home. There are stacks of letters, boxes and boxes of messages from people she doesn't know. People still email and ask how Alice is doing. Moat suffered short-term memory loss because of the accident, but that's fine with her. I don't want to remember a car hitting me. So it's a blooming blessing, she said. But she wanted to learn more about her close call. So this week, her parents returned with her to Los Angeles to meet and thank Haran and the doctors and nurses who saved her life. I think they were surprised to see me. They were hugging and kissing me, Alice said. It was a very good feeling to see her. It was wonderful to see the system didn't fail her, said Dr. Matthew Wilson, who operated on Moat 4 times and grappled along with her parents over whether to disconnect her life support. Her reunion with Haran was also joyful. I want to say thank you to the people who prayed. I want them to know they made a difference, she said. Dan is the best blooming cop in the world. It's touching, all the things that people in this city did for me. Doctors, nurses, policemen, firemen, EMTs. I had no idea how badly I was hurt. Haran said Alice Moat needed all the help she could get. He said, I'm not a philosopher or a theologian, but this time something happened. People with injuries incidental to Alice's have died in that same ER and ICU, he said. To see her walking now, enjoying life, is amazing. Some might call it miraculous. So if you wonder if this work we do really does anything, I want you to know that it does. And even people who may have never heard of the science of mind can make things happen, change lives, save lives, redirect things with their clarity of knowing, speaking into that knowing and finding a result come forth. So ponder on that one for a while and have a fantastic day. I'll see you again.